Welcome to the shop of Team MGR. I'm the Junkman, and today we're going to bleed the brakes and change the brake fluid in our master cylinder. Let's get started by removing the master cylinder cover. Most master cylinder covers are held in by two Phillips head screws. If you're having a little bit of trouble getting these screws out, use a tool like this. This is a small impact driver. All you do to use the tool, install the proper bit, and then give it a good tap with the hammer, and it should knock the corrosion loose and turn the screw at the same time. It'll depend on the age of the bike and the last time that these screws were out. These screws like to grow in here, so take your time getting them out, because you do not want to screw up the Phillips head in there and then you're getting the Dremel tool out, making a slot and using a flathead screwdriver to get these things out, and you risk ruining the cover unless you're buying another part for the bike that you really didn't need to do. Alright, now we can take the cover off and let's see how it looks in there. Oh, look at that. Looks just like coffee. The fluid, brand new fluid, should be clear or maybe even a slight amber color. This is so dark. This bike obviously has never had its brake fluid changed. You can kind of see that on the rag there. We're going to take care of that. Alright, first things first. We want to sop up all this old brake fluid in the reservoir. Now you can do this one of two ways. I'm using an old rag. You can use paper towels. If you got an old turkey baster that you're not going to use ever again, you can suck it out with there. I find just using an old rag, and this is the messy part, so if you want to use gloves, that'd be advisable. Just sop it all up out of there, because we're going to replace it and back flush the whole system. There's a couple ways to bleed the brakes on a motorcycle. I'm going to show you just one technique, the technique I prefer. The tool we're going to use here is basically a long syringe with a hose on it. You can get these at most automotive parts stores, hardware stores. Most motorcycle dealerships will have this style. Actually, if you live in the Midwest or somewhere that has farm and feed stores, they make actually bigger ones of these for administering injections to livestock, and they work really good because they hold a lot more fluid. What we're going to do is fill this with brake fluid and back flush using this. As we get set up here, I've already got my wrench on the bleeder screw, hooked my hose up. Usually if you get the right size, it'll be enough pressure on there. If not, you can put a little zip tie or something on there. We got our brake fluid, and we're using it from a sealed container. This is brand new. We're going to fill up our syringe here. Now you're going to notice, fill it up partially there, you're going to notice you're going to have a big old air bubble in there. What you want to do is, before we start this process, you're going to want to get the air bubble out. And this will take a little bit of time, just tapping the hose, and as you might see, the air bubbles will start coming out. Okay, now that we have all the air bubbles out, because we don't want to push any more air through the system than we don't have to, we can put the plunger in slowly, because we don't have the bleeder screw open. And what we're going to want to do is open the screw and gently, easy pressure, because we're filling up the master cylinder up top. It's one thing you're going to need to check periodically with this system, is checking the master cylinder up top to make sure you're not overflowing it, otherwise it'll just drip over, run over, and make a mess. You'll need to sop it up a couple times. As we can see, our master cylinder is filling up again, and of course it's pushing all that old dirty fluid through, and you can see it's about halfway full. We're going to go down and squeeze the syringe a little bit more, bring a little bit more up in here, and we're going to sop it up, do it again, repeat until the fluid runs clear. One thing I should mention throughout this process is you're going to be checking your reservoir and sopping it up a couple times as you push the old fluid through. So you're going to want a place to hang your syringe here while you're working. In this case, there was a convenient place to do it. If not, get some wire or a hook or a bungee strap, tie it around somewhere just to tie this up so you can leave it hooked up to your bleeder screw. And each time you do this, when you quit, make sure you tighten your bleeder screw back up. You do not want to let any more air into the system. We're bleeding and flushing all in one step. Okay, as we slowly squeeze our syringe, you can see the fluid coming up out of the orifice in there. And it's running pretty clear, so we'll keep squeezing till we get it just about full. And then I'll shut the bleeder screw off. We're also checking to make sure we don't see any air bubbles coming out of there, and we don't. So we know we're free of air. We got brand new fluid in there. Okay, now all we got to do is replace our master cylinder cover. Put the two little screws in. Some people like to put a little bit of anti-seize on these just to keep them from freezing up. But I change my brake fluid every 2 years or sooner, depending on how hard I am on my brakes. So these screws are coming in and out so much that they never have a chance to corrode and get locked in there. But if you got an old bike, one that hasn't been ridden in a long time, you might want to do that for good measure. That's my preferred way to bleed motorcycle brakes. However, there's a couple other ways to do it. You may have seen people use a hand-operated vacuum pump with a reservoir where you hook this end up to your bleeder nipple and then use the vacuum pump to suck the fluid through the system. I find this system to be somewhat unreliable, as you have to really keep an eye on keeping your reservoir full. If you suck the reservoir down, you just end up sucking air into your system and having to repeat the process over and over and over again. The other method of pumping the lever, opening the bleeder valve, releasing the lever, closing the bleeder valve, pumping the lever, opening it, closing it, pumping the lever, works, but on certain systems, like I'm going to show you, that is not the best way to do it, because these small master cylinders found on motorcycles just do not move enough fluid that sometimes it's not possible to bleed them that correct way. Here's an example of a master cylinder that is just too small to bleed the conventional way, and back bleeding is the only way to get a proper bleed with no air in the line. This is the clutch master cylinder on my trials bike that comes down here and operates the slave cylinder to engage and disengage the clutch. The fluid probably only moves a 1/4 inch or less. So trying to bleed it by pulling the lever in, open the bleeder valve, close the bleeder valve, release the lever, it's just not going to get it done. It just doesn't push enough fluid out the bleeder to bleed the air. You just end up pushing the bubble in the line back and forth, back and forth. And really, back bleeding with the syringe is really the only way that you can properly bleed this type of system. Here's an example of a fairly large system found here on my BMW. It's a dual front disc brake setup, so with 2 twin piston calipers. So that's 4 pistons that you have fluid running through, up to a big old massive master cylinder up here. Now this type of system is probably a system that could be bled the conventional way. However, I still prefer using the syringe method. I just know it's more reliable. If you're unfamiliar with braking systems, you're going to need to put some fluid in it. A quick word about fluid. Now, there's a couple different types of fluid on the market. You may hear terms like .3, .4, .5, .5.1. What you all really need to know is just whatever it says on the reservoir or in the owner's manual is what you should use. In this case, this bike uses .4, so that's what I'm going to use. Some of my bikes call for .3. Usually those are older bikes. Some even call for .5 or 5.1. Those are usually high performance bikes, because .5 and .5.1 have higher boiling temperatures. But for a safe bet, just use what the owner's manual or the brake master cylinder cap states. My recommendation is to change the brake fluid every 2 years, and it'll never get as bad as that bike right there.